and welcome back to All Book Club. We are your All Book librarians. We are back for another fun chat about our current YA reads. Today, this is going to be posted August 2nd. This is Season 3, Episode 8, and Brittin is going to kick us off.
I'm kicking us off with neither of my books is actually fun, I don't think. I don't think I'd use that word to describe them. So the first book is Warrior Girl Unearthed, and it's Angelline Boulley. I don't know if I'm saying that right. It's her companion novel. It's not really a sequel, but it takes place in the same island, Sugar Island, as Firekeeper's Daughter.
Oh,
it's
wow.
10 years later, I believe it is, and it's her niece is our protagonist, Perry.
Okay.
And Perry's half Ojibwe, half black. And she's getting ready for the summer of slack, she calls it. But then she gets in a fender bender, and her Aunt Donna, who paid for the repairs, says she's paying her back by going to intern with the Native Cultural Center just off Sugar Island, which she's a twin, and her twin has been dying for this intern. She's all excited. Oh. Pauline's the good twin. Perry embraces the sort of bad twin thing, so she's really kind of dragging her feet and not excited. But she gets assigned to Kooky Cooper, who runs the museum, the tribal museum, and she's thinking, how am I going to get out of this? And then he takes her to a meeting that really hooks her. And the meeting is with some people at one of, I believe that particular meeting is at a university. Mm-hmm. And they are talking about repatriation of bodies, ancestors, as well as artifacts. And it pretty much blows Perry away that some of her grandmother, she ends up finding some things she believed her great-grandmother made. They're in a storeroom, and there's just bones. Oh, and she's horrified. I mean, these are ancestors, and she's apologizing to the people and saying, we'll get you back. So she gets hooked pretty quickly. And the law, I wrote this all down so I could hopefully say it right, but in 1990, there was a federal law passed. It's called NAGPRA, Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. Mm-hmm. And the idea was that any institution that receives federal funds had, and I think they were supposed to get 5 years to inventory all their Native American artifacts, human remains, funerary objects, anything, and then inform the tribe so that the tribe could formally request the return of what they believe is theirs. Yeah. But as long as you're making a good faith effort, you can kind of drag out those 5 years, and our book takes place in current time, so 30-something years later.
Wow.
They haven't received a bunch of things from the local university, including like a dozen bodies.
Oh, my goodness.
Including one that's called The Warrior Girl, which is where our title comes from. So Donis, being the sort of bad girl, is fairly quickly convinced that by any means necessary is an okay way to get these things back. She's believing they weren't respectful, so why should she be respectful? And so on and so forth.
Ooh, I like this.
It
bad
is.
Twin.
We also throw in the subplot of Native women, missing and murdered Indigenous women, and the loopholes, they're legal loopholes that allows if a non-spouse commits violence against a tribal member on tribal land, it's a federal crime, which means that the tribe can't prosecute it. They have to wait for the federal government to get around to it. Yeah, so crazy things like that. The book is really, really well written. If any of you read Firekeeper's Daughter, it's very well written, very similar. It's
Do they have the same name?
Who have the same name?
The main character from that
Perry is Perry Firekeeper Birch.
Okay.
Donis Firekeeper was Donis. And she's Auntie Donis.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, she's Auntie Donis in this one. She's the one who makes her go work off the car repairs.
Okay.
So we throw in the missing and murdered women, And there's a sexual predator around who Donis had a run-in with, and now he is part of some of the meetings that the girls are going to, Pauline and Perry. So he ends up murdered, and Donis is one of the last ones to have been seen with them. So there's all sorts of other fun things happening. Mm-hmm. But I don't know what much more you could ask for in a book. It's a great story. It's stuff that I am still talking to people about, going, it never occurred to me. Like when I'm in the museum checking out how cool that is, that's someone's ancestor. Yeah. Like you just don't even think about it if you're not someone whose ancestors are often on display. I think it's compelling, the story. I think Perry is really quirky and snarky, and she's a great narrator, very interesting. I like a lot of the other characters that are introduced. I think that the thought-provoking side of this really stuck with me the most. Mm-hmm. I highly recommend this, whether you've read Firekeeper's Daughter or not. Mm-hmm. I would definitely recommend Firekeeper's Daughter as well.
That's fantastic.
But you don't need to have read either of them. In fact, there's some allusions to things that happened with Donis, and it's been a while since I read Firekeeper's Daughter, so I was kind of like, I don't remember anything about that, but I didn't need to.
Right.
Yeah. So definitely, it's gotten multiple starred reviews, so I think it's personally going to be a short list for the Prince. Excellent. That would be my
add it to my list.
Right, exactly. And then my other book was Alan Gratz' Prisoner B3087. Mm-hmm. And this one is historical fiction. It's based on an actual young man whose given name was Yannick. He goes by Jack, or went by Jack, when Alan Gratz was interviewing him for the book. This young man went through 10 concentration camps during his early teen years. Oh, gosh. And it's not an easy read. I definitely wanted to keep reading it. It wasn't like one of those ones where I had to put it down and come back to it because I wanted to know what was going to happen next. I think he really wrote it very well in that sense. But at the same time, I just didn't want to see what was going to happen next because it's so horrifying.
Yeah. Right. That's a tough topic.
Yeah. So that one, I would say that one is definitely a good read. We were talking a little bit about this before. I've read Refugee of his, which I found it a little bit hard to follow the 3 different points of view and everything, although it was very well done. Mm-hmm. This one isn't like that in that you've just got the one storyline, the one narrative the whole way. But it's a lot. It's, I don't know why it should hit any harder, the fact that it really happened, because a lot of the stuff that we read about that are totally fictional things have roots in reality. Yeah. But for some reason, it just kept stopping me when Yannick is thinking, how could human beings do this? Right. I was sitting there thinking, how could human beings do this? Like, what were they thinking and what were they telling themselves about this?
Right.
So another really good read, but yeah, I definitely need one of my light and happy books. Yeah.
Well, hopefully we'll give you something.
Ashley's got one.
I do have one.
Ashley's got one that was.
I may have one, but I don't know. The second one's debatable.
Yeah. Usually I don't have a good palate cleanser. Usually it's like, here's murder. And in fact, here's murder. So the first book I'm going to talk about is A Long Stretch of Bad Days by Mindy McGinnis. I've talked about some of her books before. I did The Initial Insult and The Last Laugh. Those two they go together. This is a standalone. The cover, which Justin will have up, but is awesome. I love her cover. She has some really cool artwork. But anyway, so what this one is about, it interested me because when I was going through school and stuff like that, I was a journalism major, as is Lydia Chess, who is our main character. So Lydia Chess is an aspiring journalist. She is valedictorian bound, and she's looking at the Ivy Leagues, hopefully. And then she finds out that her guidance counselor, who has a little bit of an addiction problem, had an oversight, and she's missing a history credit. So it's keeping her from graduating. So,
of course,
yes,
shouldn't be her fault.
It should not be her fault, and they make it very clear that it's not her fault. But to fight that argument would be more work than it is worth. So, the group of adults who are willing to work with her are very open to whatever she wants to do. So, Lydia has a podcast called On the Ground in Flyover Country. So she is thinking of revamping that podcast. Now, the school where she goes, it's in Ohio, Henley, Ohio. I think her graduating class has like 67 kids in it. So she's like, that's not going to. Yeah, she's like, that's not going to stand out to the Ivy Leagues that I'm the smartest one out of 60 people. So she needs something that's going to make her stand out even more. So she's going to kind of rekindle her podcast. And the podcast used to be like easy listening, just kind of her chit-chatting, and she had like 2 people who listened. But she decides to dive into Henley's history. And Henley has a bit of a dark past. They had a week called the stretch of bad days, where it was hit with a tornado, a flash flood, and the town's only murder that goes unsolved. So she decides she's going to investigate this story and find out more about that long stretch.
This is so up your alley.
Yeah, it was very much up my alley, and it's really, really well written.
You had me at murder.
Yeah.
So Lydia she comes from a very posh background. Her father's a lawyer. Her mother's very, prim and proper, and she lives in a big house, but she's totally blind to her privilege. Like, she thinks, like, we struggle too, and she's very quick to jump to her defense. Like, we don't have that much money. It's like, you have like a ballroom, so you do have that much money. So she ends up pairing up with Bristol. Bristol Jameson is very rough around the edges, to put it lightly. Like, she has a very rough background. Her family is associated with like teen pregnancies and drug use and all this stuff. And her goal is to be the first of the Jameson family to graduate high school. So very different backgrounds and socioeconomic kinds of upbringings. But and goals. But she's also faced with the same problem. She is 1 credit short of graduating.
What is up with this?
Sounds like somebody needs to lose their job, and that guy's going to.
He may have. So they pair up, and Lydia thinks it's like this great opportunity because Bristol is very, like, will add quite a bit of color to her podcast. So Bristol also has an uncle who's in jail who knows quite a bit about the stretch of bad days and can provide some background information that even the police don't know about.
Oh, wow.
So Lydia is actively trying to rein Bristol in, but they're revealing quite a lot of dark secrets in the town's history, including one about a missing teenager that was not reported missing for years. This happened during the flash flood, and she saw a discrepancy in the record, the number of people who were reported missing one year to the next.
Wow.
And she's like, how did it go from 2 people to 3 people? Like, what happened to that third person? So she starts looking into that. And then there was also history of a brothel in the town. And, like, there's lots of, like, things are just slowly but surely. And when the first podcast airs, her family is kind of, like, her father's an attorney, and he usually defended some of, like, the town's worst people. But so they start getting phone calls and, complaints and stuff like that. So Lydia's parents decide they're going to censor and listen to her podcasts before she airs them. But remember, Bristol's involved in this.
Yeah.
So Bristol just goes ahead and does it.
Right. Atta girl.
Yeah. So Bristol they split up the assignments. So Bristol's actually the one who researches the murder case. So it's pretty fascinating. It's very fast paced. And believe it or not, there's a lot of comedy thrown in there. Like, it's kind of lighthearted in the banter.
Mindy McGinnis.
Yeah.
She's pretty good.
She's pretty good with that. But obviously, there's a lot of darkness in it too. My only complaint, and this is because this is an example of, like, when your brain just gets in the way of enjoying something. So the guy who was murdered, his name was Randall Boggs, which if you've ever watched Monsters, Inc. So I'm sitting there thinking, like, it's the guy that goes invisible. So, like, really ruined it for me. But
That's where my head went.
yeah, I was like, Randall Boggs, why is that so familiar? And I was like, oh, that's why.
You just hear Steve Buscemi's voice.
Yeah, exactly. So if you can get past that, the rest of it is definitely a page turner. It's and there's a good twist at the end. You do kind of see it coming, but she pulls it off. So if you're into the murder mystery thing, definitely recommend it. My next book is very different. This is, I guess it's Beowulf or Beowulf.
I was saying Bea, but I think it is B.
Beowulf. Okay, so it's a graphic novel by Zach Weinersmith, and it's a play on Beowulf, which it is my so favorite play on Beowulf, I think, to this day.
Let's rewind first.
Count
let's just
for your
rewind because
Beowulf
is not the most
funny,
I guess, interesting nor comical book that's assigned to you at school.
No, not at all.
Yeah. However, paired with this,
it's so good. It's so. Brittin and I talked a little bit about this. I don't know who this book is for because it's intended for kids. It reads like it's intended for adults or teens. Yeah. And I feel like unless you've read and gone through Beowulf, you might not appreciate it quite as much. And maybe not. Maybe you'll just appreciate it for what it is.
Layer.
Yeah.
Yes.
You may be able to get it on the surface level, but knowing Beowulf and knowing what Mr. Grindle is,
right?
Who he is.
At the very end of the story, there are notes from the author, and it honestly that was my favorite part of the whole book. He talks a lot about like the development of the English language, even like Old English to what we hear now, and certain letters in the alphabet that didn't necessarily exist now that did back then. He talks about that. He talks about why this poem that started was not read, and then it was saved in a fire, and then it has gone through so many different translations, and then all of a sudden people are like obsessed with it. So that whole conversation that he has, he even says, if you've made it this far and continued reading, you're probably a librarian. And it's true.
Oh my gosh, she got called out.
Yeah. But it's like the ending stuff is super interesting. Especially, I took a class years ago on Chaucer, and we had to read a lot in Old English. So him explaining all of that, I'm like, see, I wish somebody had told me that then. But anyway, so what Beowulf or Beowulf is about. So it's basically the story of a clan of warrior children who are obsessed with all things that kids love. So like candy, soda, having no bedtime, and basically chaos. So they're just obsessed with this. And they have this tree house that they occupy called Tree Heart, which is, of course, a play on the mead hall. And there's no bedtime. There's no cleanup. It's a parent's worst nightmare. But
it's a free-for-all.
The kids just love it. And they have their king. They have all these, so it's all only good times there. So the biggest threat to Tree Heart is Mr. Grindle. So you can see the play on words. So he kind of reminds me of the guy from Office Space. Like he has these big glasses, massive teeth. He has like a comb over, and he is just like everything you don't like about adulthood. So everything is boring, is clean. He's talking about like either politics or taxes. Like he's just a very boring character, but he has the ability to touch. If he touches somebody, it makes them older. So it turns him into a teenager, which is also terrible, or an adult. So that's why he's the monster. Mm-hmm. So
I could see,
and that's a fate worse than death.
Yeah. Absolutely, it is
being turned into a teenager or a middle-aged person.
Yes. So Beowulf is this young girl who has like a bear hoodie that she wears, and she is the savior of this group. Like she's the one who's going to defeat Mr. Grindle, and she does in a way that's very cool because instead, if you are familiar with Beowulf, you know that he's beheaded. Grendel is beheaded. She yanks on his necktie, and that basically that is what defeats him, and he becomes a child again. So it's just fun, and it's interesting to see how they interpret this story. But I think the one part that he mentions at the very end in the notes is he mentions a kenning, which is a riddle with words. And if you read the way that this story is written, it's very similar to Beowulf, where it like has a similar beat, a similar rhythm, and lots of alliteration. So
I just got transported back to high school.
So, but like one of the examples is like a storm of swords would be a battle. His daughter called their baby the diaper stinker. Like they're just like nicknames and stuff like that. And the example that he has is you go to the cafeteria and they're offering cheese for lunch. And he wrote, "I bestrode the burger hall, brave in the storm of cheese." And that's how the whole book is written. Like it's very, it's like highbrow, but still like super cheesy.
So great.
It's a lot of fun. Like I said, I don't think your young crowd would appreciate it.
No.
I think you need to have an understanding of language to really love it. But if for nothing else, look at the illustrations because they're fantastic. They're really wonderful.
And it is funny. I mean,
it's very funny.
Yeah.
I would highly recommend it to anybody. Just take an afternoon to take a look at it because it's not a big investment, but I really enjoyed it.
Definitely want that after your
It's all yours. All yours.
Awesome.
That's it for me.
Awesome. Thank you. I guess I'll go. Yeah. All right. So I did 2 books. My first book is Messy Roots. It is a graphic memoir of a Wuhanese American. I believe I'm saying that right. I hope so. Her name is Laura Gao. And basically, she is the author and illustrator of this wonderful graphic novel. And basically, it's so much. I don't even know where to begin. She basically, it's a homage to her coming of age as she transitions from being born in Wuhan, China, and then having to move to Texas when she was like 4. So it's everything you can imagine it is. It's just life ups and downs, figuring out where she fits in, if she fits in with, her family who is still trying to keep her rooted to her roots, but also want her to become more Americanized, and then trying to fit into school where they don't understand like what you're even bringing for lunch. And I loved every minute of it. It was very reminiscent of Robin Haas, Almost American Girl.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Also another fantastic read. But what I liked about this most was just the use of the fact that it was just 3 different colors, basically. It was just like reds and yellows and blues. And it's just basically just back and forth to like, just like her entire childhood growing up and like the hardship she faced and like wanting to change her name to Laura because of the first lady so it was just an interesting take. And I love books like this, especially when I see like instances of that's also reminiscent to my growing up. Like, I don't know if anybody else feels the pain of like opening up a tin can that you think has cookies and it has like sewing kits. So that was fun. I also wanted to comment on the fact that because of where she grew up, there's also a conversation to be had that the kind of anti-Asian grunt work that she had to live through after COVID, like during COVID.
Right.
So it's like a lot of insight on how it was like for her to kind of deal with that. And also a big part of this memoir was just her trying to figure out her identity as queer. She also tries to unpack that. So very beautifully written. I think the illustrations really helped move along the story. Like she's very quirky. I really enjoyed it from start to finish. And at the end, you're just left kind of realizing like, it's messy. You can't just belong to one thing. You have to belong to like everything, and it's okay if you don't. And
sounds like who to F are you?
Yeah,
that graphic novel. Yeah,
exactly.
Another good one.
So yeah, again, if anybody else ever feels like they're the only ones trying to like figure out where they fit. I definitely would recommend picking up this graphic novel. It's a fast read. I read it in like a half hour, so it's really great. My second book, which was a little hard to get through, but I got through it because I really wanted to know how it ended. Only This Beautiful Moment, and I believe it's pronounced Abdi Nazemian. He's an Iranian author. Well, it's beautiful. Oh my gosh. So it's about 3 stories, and it's mainly about this one family, and it's 3 stories, 3 different timelines. Ooh. I know. And it's very, very difficult for one author to be able to write 3 different stories, but have them all come together. And I think he did an amazing job with this novel. I've never read anything by him about this the first novel I read. But the first story will start off with Maud, and it's 2019. He's openly gay, and he's basically getting ready to travel back with his father to Iran because his grandfather is not doing so well. So he's like the first sentence he says is like, being openly gay is exhausting. Like he's literally going through his social media and like deleting all of his pictures with his boyfriend because he's scared. He's scared of like somebody trying to find out that he's gay and like basically getting hurt when he's over there. So he's just trying to eliminate that. And that's 2019. This is a young man that's literally like doing that. So he's dealing with that. And, you know, you can kind of tell that his relationship with his dad is very strained. Like the fact that his father accepts him still doesn't accept him. You know, there's still that weirdness going on. And then you get Saeed, which is, you find out is the father. And his timeline is in the 70s, closer to the 80s. And then he basically is on the right path. He's ready to go to university, but he meets this girl, and it's during a protest, and his mind is just blown. Like, she's amazing. She just opened up a whole new door of the world to him, and he loses her. Something happens. They lose all communication, but there's that interest there. That love spark is there. And then you meet Bobby, and this is in like 1939s, 1940s. And he's aspiring to be a Hollywood star. His mom is just like really adamant that he becomes like the next Cole Porter, basically. And he's amazing. He's an amazing musician, but he's also a closeted homosexual. Like he can't tell he can't tell his parents that he's in love with his best friend, who's also like his tennis mate. So it's like all 3 of these lives, and it's like just linked together, bound by like this one main family secret that nobody wants to talk about, but then comes out when he comes to visit. So it's so good. Again, it's beautifully written. There are parts of it that kind of lost me, definitely for older teenagers, but I personally felt like it's difficult to write 3 different timelines, let alone 3 different personalities, and have them all sound differently, and he did it so well. Like I could sit and read like individual stories of all 3 of these guys and want to know what happens next, because it's just such an intriguing like tale. So again, really beautifully done. I definitely would recommend it. But yeah, there we go. That's it for me.
So what I have is House of Roots and Ruin for my first book. This one just came out yesterday. But I got I was about to say, is that your arc? Yeah. So this one is a sequel / companion novel to House of Salt and Sorrows that came out in 2019. So for anybody who doesn't know what that is, it's a dark Gothic fantasy retelling of the 12 Dancing Princesses, where the sisters keep dying off. This one is more loosely inspired by The Island of Dr. Moreau and The Haunting of Hill House. Ooh. So if you love haunted houses like me and just general Gothic spookiness, this one is fun. There's also some Crimson Peak vibes thrown in, I'm getting. So all the good stuff. And basically this follows the youngest sister from the previous novel. You don't really need to read that one just because this one kind of stands on its own. She loves to paint. She is the youngest sister of the remaining sisters who got to survive like the last book, and she's the only one left living with her oldest sister, who is the Duchess of this island. And she is feeling really restless because her sister won't let her leave, and she's saying, oh, I'm 18, it's time for me to see the world. But her sister's like, no, you have to stay here. And it turns out there's a reason why. It's because her sister reveals to her after a moment where she starts seeing her dead sisters around the house that she can see ghosts and no one else can. And her whole life, the people she's been talking to around her house or even around the island are dead people.
Oh my God. Oh,
yeah.
man.
Yeah, so she starts questioning reality. She's like, I can't stay here. So when she receives a request to commission, because she loves to paint, from another duchess in the mainland, she takes it and she sneaks out and travels all the way to this sprawling manor that's deceptively very sunny and very nice. And there she's introduced to the person she's going to paint, who is the young heir of the dukedom, Alexander. He is wheelchair bound and very, very charming. So she kind of falls for him. And but there's some the one thing I loved about this romance, even though it's a whirlwind romance, like a lot of YA ones, there's something wrong with it. It's like she keeps going, it's too fast. Like, why is this happening? And she starts seeing stuff around the house. She starts seeing her dead sister still. She starts seeing like people in white, like just floating around the grounds. She starts hearing people screaming at night, and then there are secret passageways. So she thinks, but every time in the morning, she'll find a very logical explanation for it. So she's like, oh my goodness. So, and
oh, man.
And something about the family is very weird. The Duke is a renowned botanist. He spends all his time in this huge greenhouse developing poisons from plants. The mom is very pushy. She keeps like going, hint, hint, like, my son is in love with you. So it's, it's really creepy, and it's actually a lot of fun just because, like, she's a very unreliable narrator. So,
Love that. Love those.
But on a lighter note, my second book is Guardians of the Dawn, Jara. That one is by S. Jae-Jones, who wrote Winter Song. That was a retelling of, what was that, Labyrinth. This one is very much Sailor Moon meets Cinder. And it's very true to that comp, because like you definitely get the Sailor Guardians, the Sailor Scouts, and then you definitely get like the Cinderella retelling and the protagonist and the prince falling in love. But yeah, this one's a lot of fun. So it's very...
Is she robotic? Is that where the cinder comes from?
No. So magic is forbidden in the morning realms. And Jara is now an orphan because her father was executed for being a magician. She lives with her evil stepmother, who uses all of Jara's earnings to drink. And she also has a half-sister who is going blind. So she's basically running around helping around the house, but she has this like secret. She can summon fire. Wow. So she has to hide that. And she also has to basically help out with the family. And there's also like a lot of major unrest in like the realms because there's an invading force. And then just one day she stumbles into a very handsome student who turns out to be the prince.
Of course.
And Han, the prince, he's very fun. He's
Wait a minute, Han?
Yeah.
Throw in a little Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so much fun because I have not met a love interest who's a full-on himbo. Like, if you're a fan of Ken from, like, the new Barbie movie, he has major Kenergy. Like, He is so sweet. He loves to work out. He's a little vain, but he knows he's good looking, but like he's very sweet. He's very considerate, loves and respects the main character, which I rarely see. So, yeah. And so they have to save the world.
Of course.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we hope you all who are listening or tuning in has at least gotten one book to read from our chat today. I mean, I know at least I do. As she reaches over.
I need a palate cleansing happy book. Let me take this one about murder.
Oh my goodness. That is a palate cleanser for you.
Well, it is. Yeah.
True.
So thank you guys for joining us. We're actually going to take a break in September, so we'll be back. We'll be back in October with some haunting reads, maybe. Ooh. Until then, bye.